It's time to tell you all about our program, Crossing the Andes, Argentina and Chile, where we're going to be heading next year. In fact, we've got a group on their way on this program this year, very, very soon, and I know they're all very excited about it. Let me say a few words, first of all, about Wheel and Anchor, what we are all about. We are a community of travelers from all across Canada. I started this organization back about almost 6 years ago. It's hard to believe. In 2018 is when it all started. The vision here is to bring people together for experiences around the world in a fashion that is done, in my opinion, in a way that sort of makes travel at a pace that's where you can do a little bit of your own thing, where you have time to sort of stop and smell the roses, if you'll pardon the euphemism. But I think it's very applicable, particularly in this day and age where so much of organized travel is all about trying to get so much done in little time. We're a little bit the opposite. We like to take a little extra time on our trips, be they this kind of a trip, which we designate as an experiential trip, even though we're spending 5 nights in Buenos Aires, 4 nights in Mendoza, 4 nights in Santiago. So you have ample time, as opposed to sort of a lot of other trips, which tend to be very whirlwind. But for us, it's about connecting travelers. And so our community is almost 100% folks from all across Canada. I'm actually here in Madeira in Portugal. And oddly enough, half the group here is from Saskatoon in Saskatchewan. Just a odd sort of, you never know. But the beauty is that we bring Canadians together for some amazing experiences. That's what we're all about at Wheel and Anchor. So you can, if you're new to us, you can find more about that from our newsletter and our website that tell you a little bit about our philosophy of travel and what we do. So I am going to introduce our team, or at least the key members of our team now, beginning with myself. My name is Gordon Drager. I am the founder of this community, and I have been organizing travel for Canadians for the better part for over 30 years now. So I have a great deal of experience going all around the world. But of course, we have a whole team that makes up Wheel and Anchor, in particular, our trip specialists, Paula and Barb, who are the 2 wonderful women who will pick up the phone when you call in and answer your questions and make sure that you have all the information you need in case you're interested in joining this or any one of our trips. Today, our agenda is to take you that have joined us on the webinar or watching the replay on a little trip around the southern part of South America, specifically Argentina and Chile. And I'm going to be your guide today as we make a little digital tour around the program that we're going to be running next year in March and early April, and hopefully give you some insights as to why this is an interesting trip. So let's start off with a map. I'm a map person, and so I love to look at a map to sort of see where it is that we're going. As you know, of course, Argentina and Chile, the 2 countries at the very bottom third of the continent of South America. What makes travel in South America nice is that you're largely in the same time zone. Of course, we have many time zones in Canada, so it depends where you are. But you can come down here, and despite the fact that it is a bit of a longer flight, but you don't have the jet lag because there's no difference in time, or no significant difference of time. Our program begins in the capital of Argentina, Buenos Aires, a city that, when people ask me my favorite cities in the world, pretty much Buenos Aires is always in my top 5. I love this place. It's obviously Latin American, but it has so many European influences. I tell you, walk around and you think one minute you're in Paris or Madrid, or in Rome. The way the design of the buildings, the way that people dress, the culture, the food. Buenos Aires is really an amazing city, and that's why I think it's worth spending more time there. We have a pre-program available for 3 nights up at Iguazu Falls. Iguazu Falls sits right up at the very northeastern tip of Argentina, on the border to Brazil, not far from the border of Paraguay. And this is, as far as I'm concerned, one of the most spectacular waterfalls in the world. So I'll tell you a little bit about that in a minute. So the pre-program is a few nights in Iguazu. The main trip begins in Buenos Aires. We then fly across the country to the west side of Argentina, Mendoza, which again is the capital of wine. Spend a few nights there before venturing across the Andes Mountain by road. This is certainly, I think, one of those rites of passage, if you will, is to actually do the crossing by road. It's a relatively easy crossing. It takes a whole day. And then we end up in Santiago, the capital of Chile, from where we'll visit some of the nearby cities and wrap up our trip through Argentina and Chile. So let's go into the day-by-day itinerary to give you a sense of what you can expect on this trip. As I mentioned, the beginning part of our trip takes us to Iguazu Falls. So if you're joining this trip, you'd fly from Canada, be it from Vancouver, Calgary, Toronto, wherever it is that you're coming from. There's various ways to get down to Buenos Aires. There is a flight. At the moment, Air Canada is changing their schedules all the time. There's a flight from Toronto that goes via Sao Paulo down to Buenos Aires. But there's connecting flights. You can fly on Copa via Panama City or Avianca via Bogota, Colombia. There's many ways to get down to Buenos Aires. And from there, you'll hop right back up to Iguazu on the Argentinian side, which is where we'll spend the first 3 nights visiting these incredible waterfalls. So on the arrival day, it's a bit of a long trip. So we, as in keeping with most of our programs, we don't do a lot that very first day because as I say, it's a long journey down, so you'll have time to enjoy Puerto Iguazu, which is the town on the Argentinian side of the falls, where we'll spend 3 nights, and you'll be able to then enjoy the falls. We're going to see both sides of the waterfall, as I mentioned at the outset. The river bisects is in the middle of the border between Argentina and Chile. So the first day we're going to go over and visit the Brazilian side of the falls. And unlike, well, I shouldn't say unlike, actually, like Niagara Falls, and this has got nothing to do with Niagara Falls, this, in my opinion, and listen, I was born and raised in Toronto, so I went to Niagara Falls 100 times as a kid, and it's spectacular, but this waterfall, as far as I'm concerned, beats it hands down because of its various cascades. And if you're looking at it from the Brazilian side versus from the Argentinian side, it's a very different perspective. And what you'll find is interesting is that both sides claim that they have the better views of the waterfall. I have my own opinion on that, and I better not render it because my Brazilian friends might not be happy with me. But nevertheless, we'll spend a day on the Brazilian side, taking in the falls from that side. And then on the Argentinian side as well, there are a number of trails that we'll take. We'll also take a boat trip that brings us right up close to the falls, and then we'll head back into to town by train. So 3 days, 3 nights here gives you a good amount of time to sort of actually, in fact, I made a mistake. We're going to be there for 4 nights. So my apologies. We're there for 4 nights. So that's actually good because you have the arrival day to sort of rest and relax and be prepared for 2 full days of touring the falls, and then a departure day, so that you can fully have the 2 full days to enjoy the time on the falls and still have free time for a bit of shopping and enjoying the warm weather. This area of Argentina at the very north is subtropical, as opposed to the central part, which is more of a dry, temperate zone. So it's a very, very different climate that you have here in Argentina, depending on where, I mean, the country, as you know, is huge from north to south, spanning a couple of 1,000 kilometers. So 4 days in Iguazu Falls, flying back then to Buenos Aires, from where we'll begin the rest of the program, and we'll be joining with those who opt to do the main program itself. Buenos Aires, as I said at the very beginning, for me is it's an iconic city. The caption here says Paris of the South. I don't know, honestly, whether I would call it more Paris or Madrid or Barcelona. I mean, there's so many influences, both, as I say, architecturally and culturally. So for those that joined on Iguazu, you'll have a good chunk of the day to sort of wander around on your own. It is a big Latin American city. Not well. I think it's in fact bigger than Rio de Janeiro. There's like 10 million people that live in the greater Buenos Aires area. We're obviously going to be staying right in the heart of the city in a neighborhood called Palermo. And Buenos Aires is known for its neighborhoods. You've got San Isidro, San Telmo, famous for the tango that Argentina is so well known for. You've got Recoleta, where the famous cemetery that Evita, the former first lady from years back, is buried. You've got Puerto Madero. This is the modern part of the city down adjacent to the Rio de la Plata. This is the river, which is this huge body of water that looks more like an ocean even when you're flying in. Many different neighborhoods to enjoy in Buenos Aires. And you can safely walk around in all these neighborhoods. It's like any big city. I always say you have to be, moderately careful. You don't wear your valuables or anything. I wouldn't do that in big cities in Canada for that matter. But it is generally quite a safe city. And as I say, on our second full day there, we'll have a tour that takes us around the major highlights. We'll see the Casa Rosada, which is actually the picture from where this is taken from. It's behind me on this picture here. That's the presidential palace, and this square where Plaza de Mayo, where so many of the political events have happened over the years. As you may have read, they just recently elected a new president. Argentina is perhaps as famous for its landscapes and its wine and tango as it is also for its political instability. And not in a negative sense. There are at times when they have had their share of riots here at Plaza de Mayo. At the moment, things are stable, and we certainly are hoping it'll stay that way. But this is one of the very famous squares. And again, when you look at this picture, you already instantly can sort of see the similarities to the older cities in Europe. We'll move around to San Telmo, the area with the cobblestone streets and the colorful houses. We'll visit La Boca, which is the heart of it's actually by nature a poorer neighborhood of the city, but it's where tango was sort of known to be born, if you will. And you love wandering around the streets, and you can hear that very distinctive tango music. And then you'll stick your head around a corner, and there'll be a school where they'll be teaching tango. And it's just such a colorful and vibrant part of the city. We'll also take in Puerto Madero, which used to be the port. When I first went to Argentina, which is more than 25 years ago, I think it's even longer than that. It was still a very sort of dark and dirty kind of a industrial port, but they did an amazing job at revitalizing the area, making it into one of the cultural centers of the city. And it's there in Puerto Madero that you find my favorite steakhouse in the whole world, Cabaña Las Lilas, where they make steak in the true Argentinian fashion over an open fire. Amazing stuff. So we'll have a lot of things to see. In fact, one of the highlights, one of the things that we include on this trip is a visit to the art gallery Zurbarán, where we'll visit the founder, Zalvidar himself, and he'll take us around and show us some of the original Argentine art that this place is so well known for. So it's a really kind of a neat insight into Argentinian culture. You'll see here the big wide boulevards, oh, I forgot the name of the structure in the middle there. The obelisk is one of the main landmarks of the city. Many tributes to Argentina's past, and not to mention all of the challenges that the country faced over recent decades, and but it doesn't detract from the vibrancy and from the sort of that spirit that Argentines are so well known for. As far as I'm concerned, you can't visit Buenos Aires without taking a trip across the Rio de la Plata. And here is the view from Colonia del Sacramento, which is the town directly across in Uruguay. So we also include a day trip over to Uruguay on this trip. Uruguay, if you don't know much about it, is a fairly small country in South America, but is one of the most stable and one of the most economically equal countries. So by visiting Colonia for the day, this is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It was designated about 30 years ago, and again has wonderful tree-lined cobblestone streets, and it's actually a walled old town, one of the few towns in South America that still retains some of the old walls. We'll get a little bit of sense of that. And this city has so much charm. So, and we had such great feedback that I think it's so amazing to make this trip by high-speed hydrofoil across the Rio de la Plata. You can see this is a river, but you can see how wide it is from the picture here. You can't even see the Argentinian coast on the other side, yet it takes a little over an hour by high-speed hydrofoil to get across to Colonia. We'll have a whole day at leisure. Again, this is something I'm a very big believer in, is that you have lots of time to explore on your own. For those that want to venture a little bit further afield into Buenos Aires' neighborhoods, you could visit the National Art Museum, the Museo de Bellas Artes. There is also the so-called Grand Splendid Bookshop, which has over 100,000 books, one of the most opulent in all of South America. You could visit Recoleta, because I think that when we walk around on our first day on our sightseeing tour, we'll certainly see parts of the cemetery, the famous Recoleta Cemetery where Evita was buried. But there's so much else to that particular neighborhood that it warrants itself spending at least a half a day wandering around. But maybe you want to take your own hand at tango dancing. They have lots of studios that offer sort of a little introduction to tango. It is such an amazing thing to watch. And of course, that evening we'll visit a tango show and see how it all goes down. I always like to mention Argentina, much like Spain, they eat late at night. So these tango shows, we show up at like 7:30, 8 o'clock, have dinner, which is very early by Argentine standards. They're often not eating before 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and then the show goes on, and you get brought back home sometime after midnight. But that's part of the culture, and that's part of what exploring Argentina is all about. One other thing that we're going to do that, again, most trips don't do because they don't take enough time in Buenos Aires, we're going to head out to the delta of the Parana River. So we're going to head up the Rio de la Plata. In fact, we're going to go along the coast to a place called Tigre. This area is kind of like the cottage neighborhood, if you will, for porteños. Porteños are the people, the name of the people that live in Buenos Aires. And so it's a whole archipelago of islands amongst the river. In some ways, it'll be reminiscent of cottage country in southern Ontario or in the interior of BC, with all kinds of little cabins and houses dotted around. We'll take a boat trip through the delta, and the feedback that we got from this year's trip was, from last year's trip was, people really enjoyed seeing this side of Buenos Aires in Argentina that is uncommonly visited in most tours because there isn't the time. So one of the highlights. So then on our 6th day, we will hop a flight from Argentina's domestic airport, George Newbery, or Aeroparque as they call it locally, and we'll fly from the airport, which is very close to downtown, over to Mendoza. It's a couple of hours flight, and we'll arrive in this city that is best known as the capital of wine in Argentina, not just in Argentina, actually in the whole world. And what I like about Mendoza is, the tree-lined streets. This is a great, gives you a great feel of the city. The city, of course, sits in the shadow of the Andes Mountains, in the foothills, surrounded by, it's in a way, I try to make comparisons to Canada. It's like driving from Calgary to Banff, right? The surrounding countryside is sort of very gently rolling hills, but sort of more a flat landscape. And then you have the towering Andes Mountains that are just a short drive outside of the city. So by spending 4 nights here in the center of town, you'll get a good flavor of sort of the real Argentina. Not that Buenos Aires isn't real, but here in Mendoza, you're deep in the heart. So we'll have a tour around the city itself, Independencia Square, San Martin Park, which is an incredible park and one of the most important in Argentina. It's huge, 420 hectares. So we'll spend a few hours discovering the center of the city with our guide, and then we'll have time in the afternoon to visit all the great shops that they have there. They make incredible chocolate in Argentina here in Mendoza. Leather is a very important thing that you can buy there, and of course wine. But for the wine, we'll have lots of opportunity to do that. First of all, on our second day in Mendoza, we're going to go to a private cooking class at the Restaurante Bodega, where we'll learn a little bit about Argentine cuisine. And as you probably know, Argentine cuisine is very much about beef. But if you haven't had a lot of Argentine beef before, and we don't see much in Canada, of course, we have our own beef as well as that from the US, but most beef in Argentina is grass-fed, as opposed to the corn-fed stuff we get in North America. So it has a bit of a different flavor for it. And the other thing is that the classic Argentine parrilla in Spanish, but in Argentina they pronounce a double L like a J, is the Argentine barbecue, and they literally cook every part of the cow. Some of parts that might not be so amenable to your palate, but it's interesting to see how this is done. Not to mention how they make the famous empanadas and the tamales. Some of the cuisine will be reminiscent of Mexican food, but of course Argentinian has their own distinct dishes and flavors and so on. So, of course, we'll not only learn how to cook it, but we'll enjoy it over a glass of wine from the local Mendoza area. So that's going to be our so-called garden to plate cooking experience. Again, always a highlight on our programs. And then we're going to head out and about into the wine and olive regions of Mendoza. So in the surrounding areas is a great picture here that gives you that flavor of the winelands, which are largely down in the plains and the Andes out in the back. And so we'll visit a couple of different spots. We'll taste some of the different wines that Argentina has to offer. You know, what's interesting is that, you know, something like 80% of Argentinian wines never leave the country. And I think that applies to a lot of wine producing countries. I always say they keep the best stuff at home. So we'll get a chance to sample that. And you have to go beyond Malbec, which is the most famous grape variety in Argentina, and try some of the other grape varieties that are perhaps lesser known. And again, that's the part that makes this so exciting. You will definitely be blown away by some of the wines that you'll get an opportunity to taste going around. But also the olive oil. This is also an olive oil producing region. We never hear about it. Most of our olive oil comes from Spain or maybe Italy or other parts of Europe, but Argentina has its own olive oil. So we'll have a great day experiencing all of that. We then make our trip across the Andes, and obviously we call the program Crossing the Andes specifically for this reason, because making this road adventure is, as I say, sort of a bit of rite of passage, because we start down from Mendoza and we head up these this photograph here is actually on the Chilean side of the border. On the Argentinian side, it's a pass that goes up, but it's long straightaways and then a curve and then a long straightaway all the way back, and you gradually make your way all the way up to about 3,200 meters above sea level, which is around about 10,000 feet. On the way, if the weather's good, we'll have a chance to see Mount Aconcagua, the highest mountain in the Andes. And you will immediately be sort of comparing the landscape to, for example, our Rocky Mountains or the Alps or the Himalayas if you've been out there. The Andes are a very how can I describe it? A very barren, a very stark landscape. They're different than any other mountain range that I've come across around the world. And so driving up through them and spending this day is truly amazing. We'll cross the border into Chile, where border crossings are still like the old days. It's uh, they get along, but at the same time, you can tell crossing the border that there are certainly still some call it animosity, if you will, between the two countries. And so crossing from one to the other by land gives you that sense. Heading back down the other side, the road is a little twistier, like you see here, with many, many switchbacks. As we make our way back down to Chile, passing the ski resort town of Portillo, which of course, being in the southern hemisphere, their ski season is in our summertime. That's winter for them. And I remember passing by the hotel in Portillo and seeing pictures of the Canadian team from way back in the 80s and 90s. I'm not sure if they still train there, but a lot of them would go down during the summertime, which again, of course, is their winter, to train for the races in the winter in Northern Hemisphere. We'll end up in Santiago later in the afternoon, and from there admire this great city. So Santiago, again, quite different than Buenos Aires. Buenos Aires really sits in the plains on the banks of the Rio de la Plata, but Santiago is surrounded by the Andes Mountains. The mountains go almost all the way around, so it's kind of like in a bowl. And this gives its sort of its own microclimate as well. It's a very bustling city. It's a very modern city, lots of skyscrapers. When you're in the central part of Santiago, again, you'll sometimes think that you're in a big city in North America. Chile has done very well economically over the years, but the Old Town part, which we'll visit as we do our classic sightseeing tour, will take us past some of the older buildings, the Palacio de la Moneda, which is the financial, the sort of the central bank, if you will, Plaza de Armas, the central post office. Will head around the very cool neighborhood called Bella Vista, which is kind of like the Queen Street West, if you're a Torontonian, or I'm not so familiar with the other ones in Canada, but the very artsy sort of side of town. We'll see lots of different things, and at the end we'll head up to San Cristobal by cable car. That's where you see this picture is taken from, for an amazing view overlooking this very sprawling city that again is surrounded by the Andes Mountains. We'll make a day trip from Santiago to the coast, visiting two cities, one in particular, Valparaiso, as noted here, the jewel of the Pacific. This is often a stop, but sometimes the end point on cruises that go around the southern tip of South America. Valparaiso is a big port town, but its claim to fame is the funiculars that are all around the city. And I don't think there's any shown actually in this picture here, but Valparaiso has these UNESCO funiculars, some of them dating back to the late 19th century, that connect the lower city to the upper parts of the city. And they're like antique tramways, antique funiculars. So we'll get at least a chance to ride at least one of them. But they are kind of what defines the city's character. We'll make a quick stop as well in Viña del Mar, which is a town not far from Valparaiso, which is nicknamed the Garden City and has wonderful parks and gardens. And again, all of these are nestled along the side of the Pacific Ocean. We'll have a whole day at leisure to explore Santiago. Like Buenos Aires, it's a reasonably safe city. I mean, there's parts of town that you wouldn't wander around in, but we'll certainly stay far afield from those. But heading down to Mercado Central is a great way to sort of get a taste of Chilean culture. There's also the La Estaria neighborhood, which has a neighborhood that really came into being in the later part of the 20th century. The Human Rights Museum is almost a must-see, where they take a deeper look into the terrible human rights violations that took place during the Pinochet era. Pinochet, of course, was the military dictator who ruled Chile for the better part of 17 years. Many, many different things that you could do on your free day in Santiago, and that will take us to the end of our trip. So from here, one can continue a journey elsewhere in South America. I know that some of our members from last year's trip planned a trip up to the Atacama Desert in the northern part of Chile, which is really wondrous and worth seeing. You could head south to the Lake District south of Santiago, or you could go wine tasting in Chile. Of course, Chile is perhaps even better known for its wines than Argentina. And the Colchagua Valley is just a couple of hours drive south. Many different things that one could do, or of course you could hop your flight and head back home. Again, being in almost the same time zone, it's a great destination for a couple of weeks, particularly at the end of our winter when the weather is still glorious down there. We've been fortunate. We made some alterations to the positive on this trip for next year. So the price, believe it or not, in contrast to other trips, has actually come down by a little bit from this year to next year. So I think this represents great value for 2 weeks in South America with such an intensive look at both of these countries and these two capital cities. Our programs, as usual, include many different things. I'm not going to go through them all here, but our program itinerary highlights the various inclusions, the breakfasts. We've got some very nice hotels, centrally located, and we've got usually either a lunch or a dinner every single day of the trip. Of course, we have a domestic flight between Buenos Aires and Santiago that's included in the program as well. For those wishing to come a few days earlier on our pre-program to Iguazu, we note the price there. That includes the round-trip flights as well as accommodation at a very, very nice hotel in Iguazu, and of course guiding and the experience to both the Brazilian and Argentinian side of the falls. I do highly recommend visiting Iguazu. I've shown you a few pictures here, but I can honestly say I've been fortunate to visit a couple of times, and this waterfall is really, really, I think, one of the most scenic one in the world, and I've been to many different waterfalls. As with all of our programs, the airfare is separate, but can be facilitated by our office through a partner company that we use that does all of our air tickets. Of course, travel insurance is also something that is highly recommended, and that we recommend that you looking into, and Barb or Paula can give you a quote on that if you're interested in this program. If you sign up for the trip early, the earlier we make commitments to our hotels, the better deal that we get. We pass that on to our members, so there's a couple of $100 off for those that sign up before the end of April. This destination, like many others, is getting full earlier, and so I know sometimes we have to close the programs for sale before our members would like, not because we're full necessarily, but because the hotels are full, and they demand that we pay for the rooms in good time. So better to get signed up early and put this into your program for next year. The sooner the better. I'll take some questions now, but of course, if you have questions after the webinar is over, or if you're watching the replay, if you have questions at any time, please just drop Paula or Barb a note or give us a phone call, and we'll make sure we get all those questions answered. So hi, Barb.
Hi.
Time to take any questions that anybody has about this program through Argentina and Chile.
Sure. One question is just with the trip on the road and stuff, is there any concern with altitude or motions like sickness, and any advice on that?
Yeah, great question. So altitude isn't really a factor. I mean, we do head up to 3,200 meters above sea level, but we are on the bus for most of that day. I mean, the most you'd get out is to do the passport formalities. So, and honestly, 3,000 meters, 10,000 feet below that is, for most people, not a problem. And, you know, unless you're planning to sort of run a marathon or undertake any strenuous activities. If anybody does have sort of particular sensibilities, you know, with their lungs or so on, then, you know, it's not a bad idea to consult with your physician before going. But for most people, it's not an issue. Motion sickness, well, yeah, there are switchbacks. So we're going back and forth up this road. So as with many of our trips, if you are somebody that suffers from car sickness or you think you might, better to take some appropriate medication or the bands that they have to mitigate that. It's always a good idea.
Okay, great. We have a question about dietary restrictions. If somebody's a pescatarian, is there any issues eating in Argentina or
No
any?
problem. So, I mean, although Argentina is definitely a beef and meat eating country, in the meantime, in fact, I have some very good friends in Buenos Aires who are vegetarians, and they have no problem because while Argentina produces a lot of cattle, they also produce a lot of fresh vegetables. So we can accommodate most dietary restrictions within reason. And certainly, if you prefer fish over meat, which quite honestly I do as well, then yeah, we can certainly accommodate that if we know that in advance. So that's not a problem.
Perfect. Okay. There is also a question about insects that bite, no-see-ums or anything like that on the program or the.
Yeah, good question. So, I mean, yeah, Iguazu is in the subtropical zone, so it is warm and moist. And with any climate that's like that, you do have, you know, some flying creatures like mosquitoes. They do exist. They aren't. Here's the thing, they're not nearly as bothersome as they are in southern Canada in the late spring, early summer, but they do exist. So yeah, if you're particularly susceptible to sort of flying insect bites, then we always say the insect repellent that we have in Canada is, I think, some of the strongest in the world, and that generally helps people overcome that. But I personally have not found it to be a big problem, quite honestly. Oh, Barb, you've gone on mute.
Sorry.
Oh.
Is there any requirements in terms of vaccinations? Any shots required?
So to my knowledge, there are no specific shots that are mandatory or like to enter the country as of the current time. Sorry, this thing. But we always suggest, particularly when visiting regions like this, to consult with your physician and see what they recommend. Because you know, whether it's a travel medical clinic or your own doctor, they make their own recommendations. Quite honestly, personally, I have not taken any vaccinations in visiting this part of South America, but that's me. We can't give specific advice on that. We have to refer you to your own physician or to a travel medical clinic. I always do say take their advice with a bit of a grain of salt, but there are no specific vaccination requirements to get in. The only exception would be yellow fever, which only applies if you're traveling from so if you're traveling from Zambia in Africa, and you have the stamp in your passport and you're traveling from there to Argentina, you'd have to show a yellow fever certificate. But since most of our members are probably going to be coming from Canada, that one won't apply. But we recommend to check, and we put in our additional information document a link to the Government of Canada website about Argentina, and in there is also information and a link to any of the vaccinations that you might wish to consider or that would be required. So do a little research on that, but as I say, to my knowledge at this point, there are no required vaccines for folks coming from Canada.
Okay, perfect. How many would be on this trip?
I think this time around we have a dozen, if I'm not mistaken. So this trip size will be anywhere from 10 to about a maximum about 18 people. But I know that last year and this year we were running around 10, 12. So that's probably the number that we can expect for next year as well. But it certainly will not exceed 18 people on this trip, just because of the nature of the vehicles that we're using and because we are dedicated to smaller groups.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And just on that note, we are limited to how many singles we can take. So if you are a solo traveler looking, the sooner the better.
Exactly. The hotels limit the number of single rooms that we can occupy for that price. So if you are a solo traveler looking for your own room, it's better to book early because again, we're limited in the number of single rooms that we can do. I saw one other question back here from from Sandeep. We're flying from Buenos Aires to Mendoza. Absolutely. Otherwise, we would need an extra 3 days to drive across Argentina. So yes, most definitely we have included in the program a domestic flight from Buenos Aires to Mendoza.
Perfect. And what about the weather?
What about the weather? Well, this is sort of the end of summertime. So this is late winter, early spring. So the weather is going to be marvelous, probably in Buenos Aires and even in Mendoza for that matter, likely in the low to mid 20s in the day. Could be a little cooler at night, particularly in Mendoza, because of course you're up in the foothills of the Andes Mountains. And the weather in Santiago will be similar. So it'll be warm, but not likely to be hot. But cool in the evening. So it's perfect traveling weather. That's kind of why we chose this time of the year, because it's a great time to get away and get a little early start on summer at home.
Okay, perfect. So that so far is what has come in. So people are welcome. Definitely, if you have any interest in the trip, reach out to myself or Paula. Like we've said, we have an additional information document which goes more into the nitty-gritty of the trip. So you do need to come to us for that. And any other questions that you might have, we would love to talk to you.
Fantastic. So I hope you'll consider joining us for this trip next year. This will be the third time we've run it. It's become quite popular because again, we are focusing on these three centers, which give you a great sense of South America, particularly if you haven't been to this part of the world before. It's a great way to sort of get a little bit of Argentine and Chilean culture on this trip. So please do join us for any of our upcoming webinars. We're going to be launching our trip to Egypt and the Nile for next year around the same time on March the 26th. So that's a week from today at 4 p.m. Eastern time. And Barb has posted the link in the chat box. Of course, you'll find it as well on our list of webinars in our weekly newsletter. Thanks for joining us today, and I hope you found this informative all about South America and Argentina and Chile, and would love to have you along and look forward to catching up with you on another webinar in the near future. Take care and have yourselves a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.